There's a strange moment in every relationship, a moment when their silence no longer hurts you, when the distance between you no longer bothers you, and when you no longer feel the need to be understood. You're not being cold. You're not pretending to be strong. You simply stop, quietly, decisively, and more peacefully than ever before. The strange thing is, it's in that exact moment when you withdraw emotionally, stop explaining, stop trying, stop needing, that the other person begins to sense something has shifted. Not in you, but in themselves, because for the first time they can feel that they're no longer on your mind. Maybe in the past you were always the one to reach out first, the one to break the silence, the one who softened, forgave, and restarted the conversation. You used to crave a response, a sign, anything to show that you still mattered. But over time, you came to realize the more emotionally attached you were, the further they pulled away. And so, you chose something different, not a dramatic exit, but a soft, quiet detachment, one that no longer depended on them. You kept your energy for yourself. You stepped out of the emotional loop that used to spin you endlessly. And in that exact moment, they began to see your value. In this video, you'll understand why that happens, why the moment you stop needing them, they start needing you. Why respect doesn't come from how much you give, but from how much you're able to keep for yourself. And why sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is to walk away silently and take back everything you once gave away. Don't leave just yet, because this isn't a video about making someone come back. It's a journey back to yourself and a reminder that you were never incomplete to begin with. Respect doesn't vanish after one argument. It doesn't disappear because of temporary distance or unresolved differences. It starts to erode in the smallest moments, when you lose your inner balance and begin to need the other person just to feel enough. You might not even realize it, but every time you worry too much because they didn't text back, every time you reach out first even when you know they're being intentionally distant, every time you ignore your own feelings just to keep them around, you're not just giving up your self-respect. You're silently trading away your position in their eyes. Why? Because the moment you act like they're the center of your emotional world, you hand them control. They no longer feel the need to be careful or to try, because deep down they know no matter how far they pull away, you'll be the one who comes closer. And human nature, once it feels too secure in being needed, starts to lose its sense of appreciation. The more you need them to feel complete, the more they see you as the weaker one, not because they're bad, but because human psychology is wired this way. We only respect what holds its ground, even in silence. The need for a reply, the need for reassurance, the need to feel validated. These things might seem harmless, but if repeated long enough, they begin to strip away your value in the relationship. Because you're no longer loving, you're waiting, not for connection, but for comfort. And once love is mixed with fear, respect is always the first thing to leave. They might still stay, still say kind words, still play a role in your life, but deep down, they no longer look at you with the same respect, because now they know you can't stand on your own if they pull their love away. And once someone feels like you won't leave, they stop trying to make you stay. You don't need to harden yourself to appear cold. But as long as someone else determines the stability of your emotions, you're still giving away the most powerful thing you have, the ability to govern your own heart. The hard truth is this: people only change when they feel there's a real risk of losing something they don't want to lose. But if you keep staying, keep initiating peace, keep accepting the things that hurt you in their eyes, you're not something that can be lost. You're a constant, always there, no matter what they do or don't do. And that's exactly why they don't feel the need to change. You may have believed that if you were patient enough, gentle enough, loving enough, they'd finally understand. But the issue was never about how much love you gave. It's about the fear you carried with you. You were afraid of losing them, so you excused disrespectful words. You were afraid of losing them, so you tolerated behaviors you knew were unfair. You were afraid of losing them, so you became the one always trying to keep the relationship from falling apart. And they can feel that. They don't need to read your mind. They only need to watch how you react when they go silent, when they pull away, when they test boundaries. If you respond with anxiety with the first message, with apologies for things you didn't even do, the message you're sending is crystal clear. I'm more afraid of losing you than you are of losing me. And where there is fear, there is imbalance. They no longer need to adjust their behavior because you're already doing that for them. They no longer need to ask how you feel because you're always the one stepping in to smooth things over. And they never need to change because you've never made them feel like anything they value is truly at risk of being lost. Change doesn't come from guilt. It comes from a sense of risk. And if you've never made the other person feel that you're capable of stopping, pulling back, or walking away, then they have no real reason to reflect on their behavior. On the other hand, when you stop acting out of fear, when you begin to hold your energy for yourself, when you stay silent instead of chasing validation, they begin to feel something they've never sensed from you before, that you're no longer staying no matter what. And it's in that moment that they start to change, not because you're loving them more, but because you're no longer afraid. You can't expect someone else to change while you're still operating from the same emotional patterns. You can't demand respect if you keep responding like someone afraid of being left. And you can't reclaim your power in the relationship if you're still letting someone else's feelings determine your value. To change the entire dynamic, you have to begin from within. And the first, most powerful, yet most difficult step is to separate yourself from an emotionally manipulated state. Emotional detachment doesn't mean you've stopped caring. It doesn't mean you've gone cold or that you're pretending to be strong or avoiding the truth. It simply means your energy has shifted. Instead of reacting, you observe. Instead of instantly expressing yourself, you hold back. Instead of chasing answers, you choose silence and allow the other person to face what they've created. Why does that matter? Because in every relationship, the one who maintains emotional stability holds the power. When you stop talking, stop texting, stop explaining, you reclaim the ability to choose what deserves your mental space and what doesn't. You begin to distinguish between true feelings and fleeting reactions, between core values and the desire to feel validated. That detachment, although quiet, becomes unmistakably loud to the other person. They feel it right away. You're no longer in their hands. You're no longer orbiting their moods. And most of all, you no longer need them to feel worthy. That emotional, energetic, and mental independence, that's what makes you different. You're no longer the person they assumed would always welcome them back. Now, you're someone with boundaries, with limits, with a calmness that makes them hesitate. And here's the strange part. When you stop reacting, the other person begins to reflect. When you pull back emotionally, you create space for them to, for the first time, truly see you. People rarely change when you talk. They change when there's no one left to react to them. In the past, every time they said something hurtful, you responded. When they pulled away, you panicked. When they were indifferent, you tried to reconnect. You became part of a reaction loop that kept them from facing their own behavior. Because you were still there, still reacting, still sensitive, still needing them. But when you stop seeking explanations, stop trying to clarify, stop caring what they think or feel, something new begins to unfold. Without your reactions, they're left to look at themselves. This is the moment many people never see coming. They've become so used to saying whatever they want, doing whatever they please, because you were always the one who softened first. But now, your silence feels different. It's not a sulking silence waiting to be comforted. It's an absence that carries weight. A quiet space that doesn't ask, doesn't speak, doesn't need anything. And that space becomes a mirror. When you no longer react, no longer respond to their emotional games, they lose their anchor for blame. There's no one left to say you're too sensitive, I've been busy, or you're overthinking. For the first time, they're left alone with their own words, actions, and indifference. And that's when they begin to question themselves. Not loudly, not immediately, but gradually with every quiet moment, they begin to feel the loss of control. Not because you threaten to leave, but because you no longer need them in order to stay. That reflection is a turning point. It doesn't come from your effort to convince them. It comes from the energy you've completely withdrawn. It's what makes them realize you've changed. Not because someone pushed you, but because you chose to let go. You're no longer reacting to them. You've become the one who causes them to reflect on themselves. And in that silence, for the first time, they finally see it. The person they thought they had figured out is now the one they can no longer read. In the emotional world, there's a paradox that never changes. The person who doesn't need anything from you is the one you can't stop thinking about. Not because they're playing mind games, but because they radiate a different kind of energy, calm, grounded, untouched by expectation. When you stop chasing their attention, stop seeking explanations, stop measuring their affection by their replies, you're not just freeing yourself. You're also creating an irresistible energy they can no longer control. Because now, they no longer know what you're thinking. They don't know if you're still there. They don't know if you've let go, or if you're just waiting. And it's that uncertainty, not your past complaints or emotional reactions, that finally makes them feel unsettled. You used to play the role of someone who was too obvious, too easy to read, too emotional. They knew exactly how you felt, and they knew you'd stay no matter how they behaved. But once you began pulling back that sense of need, they no longer knew where you truly stood in their life. You were no longer attached by emotion but by distance. And that distance made them feel something missing. Attraction doesn't come from proving how much you love someone. It comes from not needing to prove anything at all. You simply exist calmly, freely, without chasing, without demanding, without clinging. And that quiet wholeness is what makes you rare, and rare is always valuable. They might find many people who are willing to love them, but it's rare to find someone who still loves without needing, who still cares without clinging, who still sees value in another person without losing the value of themselves. That's why you start to carry weight. Not because you created distance to manipulate, but because you returned to yourself. You didn't pull away to play games. You pulled away to protect your energy, to regain your center, to stop being pulled into what no longer deserved your peace. And when you do that, you become hard to replace. The person who once believed you'd always be there is no longer so sure. You don't have to say anything dramatic or suddenly act cold or change your attitude to make an impression. You only need to do one thing: withdraw the emotional energy you once poured into them. Because before, even if you didn't realize it, they could always feel your presence, not just through words or actions, but in how your mind constantly revolved around them. You thought about them more than they thought about you. You adjusted your emotions based on their moods. You considered them in every decision because a large part of your inner world had made them an invisible anchor. And that gave them a sense of safety, not the healthy kind, but a complacent one. They believed you wouldn't leave because you never showed them you could. But the shift didn't come from a dramatic conversation. It came from a quiet transformation in your energy. You no longer overanalyzed their messages. You stopped waiting for a reply to determine where you stood. You no longer let your emotions be led by theirs. You began returning to yourself grounded, still, and no longer needing anyone to feel whole. And they started to feel that. Not knowing what's on your mind, they feel you further away, even though you're still there. No longer able to control your reactions, they lose the sense of being the center. No more initiating texts. No more watching eyes. No more signs that you need them like before, and that creates a quiet anxiety beneath their calm appearance. That uncertainty makes them think about you more, not because you said anything, but because your silence lasted long enough to make them question what's truly going on. You don't need to leave dramatically or disappear entirely. The moment you stop sending energy toward them, they feel something deeper than any spoken word. You stopped revolving around them. And what makes them feel the emptiness isn't that you're no longer physically in their life, but that you're no longer present in their mind the way you used to be. No longer in their heart in that familiar way, passive, predictable, and available. You are now a space they cannot fill again because they once took it for granted. They don't miss you just because you left. They miss you because you stopped existing inside them. You can remind someone 100 times that you deserve to be treated well. You can explain your boundaries in the clearest words. And you can even demand fairness in how they respond. But if inside you're still a space that's easily shaken, if you still react every time they pull away, if your emotions still depend on how they treat you on any given day, then no matter how reasonable your words are, they still won't truly respect you. Because respect doesn't come from what you say, it comes from the energy people feel when they step into the inner space you've created. When you can hold emotional distance not with coldness but with calm self-possession, people will no longer treat you carelessly. They won't say thoughtless things because they know you're not someone who can be swayed by emotion anymore. They won't pull you into power games because you no longer play the way you used to. And they won't be able to control you because you've disconnected the emotional power source they once used to influence you. What creates true respect isn't loud reaction, it's the kind of silence that makes people hesitate to cross a line. Not because you threaten to leave, but because they know when you go quiet, it means you've seen everything and now you're evaluating. Not based on feelings, but based on values. That inner distance where you no longer need them to feel worthy, no longer react just to hear comfort, no longer wait on them to feel enough, that is what makes you truly respectable. Others won't be able to touch you the way they used to because you've created a private space around yourself. Not arrogant, not distant, but grounded. They'll sense that your silence is not a mood, it's a way of being. And they will adjust, not because you forced them to, but because respect was triggered from a deeper place, one no words could ever reach. From that moment on, you no longer need to explain much. All you have to do is keep your own rhythm, stay true to your values, and protect the emotional space you've built. And if the other person has enough awareness to understand, they'll instinctively step more gently into the silence you now guard. There's a kind of freedom that can't be seen with the eyes, but everyone can feel it when they stand next to you. Emotional freedom. When you're no longer caught in the swirl of questions like, are they thinking about me? Are they changing or just testing me? Should I text them or stay quiet a little longer? You've already taken one step out of emotional dependence. And when you no longer need someone else's answer to feel at peace inside, you've taken the other step into a step few ever reach. Emotional independence. That kind of freedom doesn't make you cold, in fact, it makes you warm. But it's the warmth of a flame with boundaries enough to comfort those who deserve it, and strong enough to keep away those who don't appreciate it. When you reach the point where your inner world is no longer dictated by someone's presence or absence, you no longer need to leave loudly or act indifferent. The self-governed energy you radiate becomes a silent declaration. I don't belong to anyone, and I certainly don't need to cling to anyone to feel worthy. And that's exactly what makes you rare. The other person may not say it out loud, but they know you're no longer staying out of softness, and you're no longer waiting out of old habits. They realize you're still capable of opening up, but not in the way they once knew. Not easily, not unconditionally, and not vulnerably. Now, if someone wants to reach you, they'll have to slow down, look more closely, and approach with both respect and awareness. Because you're no longer available to those who are temporary, to those who love only when it's convenient, and to those who are only kind when you still need. You're not someone who plays hard to get, but you've lived enough to know inner peace is more valuable than any connection. And if someone can't walk beside you while staying kind, they don't deserve to stay, not even in your thoughts. That freedom is what makes you the kind of person others fear losing. Not because you're creating distance, but because you've stopped clinging, you've stopped needing, and you've stopped being afraid. There are changes that don't need to be announced. They don't come with dramatic exits or loud complaints. They happen quietly in the way you stop reacting, stop texting first, stop chasing after validation. And then, without a single word spoken, people simply feel it and they know everything has changed. Because they were used to a version of you, the one who always understood, who always waited, who always gave in, who always tried to reconnect when distance appeared. But now they don't see that person anymore. Instead, they see someone else, calmer, wiser, and quietly pulling back what was once given unconditionally, your dependence. They used to believe you'd never leave. Now, they're not so sure anymore. And that's the turning point. When you reclaim your place not through words, not through forced toughness, you no longer need them to feel whole. You no longer need their attention to feel valuable. You don't need anyone to hold on to you because you've already learned how to hold on to yourself. The moment you stop sending your energy their way is the moment they begin to feel the emptiness. The moment you stop needing them emotionally is the moment they begin to need you. And the moment you stop staying out of habit is when you become the one they don't want to lose. You don't need to do anything grand to be respected. You simply need to step out of the role of the one who always tries and return to yourself. That's where respect begins. And that's also where you'll never be underestimated again.